Hi there. Today we're going to explore the plot of the 2024 film, The Life of Chuck. A teacher and his ex-wife become witnesses to a series of global catastrophes that resemble a prophecy of the end of the world. Over time, they begin to suspect that all these events are somehow connected to a mysterious man named Chuck. The film, based on a short story by Stephen King, begins right away with the third act, titled Thank You, Chuck. Marty, a middle school teacher, is giving a lesson when a fire truck suddenly rushes past the window. One of the students shares some shocking news. A powerful earthquake has struck California, and part of the coastline has literally sunk beneath the ground. The students want to check the information, but it turns out that the internet has gone down. The connection does not come back. Time passes, and the lack of network access begins to trouble parents even more than their children's academic performance. Meanwhile, terrifying reports keep coming in from around the world. Earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, and massive wildfires. Stuck in traffic, Marty suddenly notices a strange billboard with the portrait of a man and the words, Charles Krantz, 39 wonderful years. Thank you, Chuck. The story then shifts to Felicia, Marty's ex-wife. She works at a hospital, helplessly watching patients die when there is no way to save them. Saddened, she calls Marty that evening. During their conversation, Felicia admits that she is convinced humanity is approaching its end, and that all these disasters are simply signs of what's to come. Trying to explain the scale of what is happening, Marty recalls the so-called cosmic calendar. If the Big Bang hypothetically occurred at the very first second of January 1st, then the entire history of humanity would fit into the final 14 seconds of December 31st, and those seconds are now running out. But their thoughts are interrupted by a strange broadcast. On every TV channel, a color test pattern suddenly appears. From time to time, it is replaced by the same message. Thank you, Chuck. The next morning, Marty runs into his neighbor Gus. Gus tells him that a massive sinkhole has appeared nearby, swallowing an entire street. Horrified, Marty realizes that this was the very road he had driven down the previous night, and he could have easily been one of the victims. Later, he asks a bank employee about the strange billboard thanking Chuck, which was standing right near her workplace. But the woman only shrugs. No one by that name has ever worked there. The world continues to spiral into chaos. In the sky, airplanes leave messages that read, Thank you, Chuck. Graffiti with his name begins appearing on walls. Felicia goes to work, but the hospital is already empty. Only one of her colleagues remains. All the others, both staff and patients, have vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, Marty tries to call Felicia, but the mobile network also disappears. Determined, he sets off to reach her on foot. Along the way, he meets an elderly man named Sam. It turns out Sam owns a funeral home, though he always dreamed of becoming a meteorologist and presenting weather forecasts. Sam tells him something strange. A day is actually slightly shorter than 24 hours. In the past, this was balanced out by leap years, but now everything has changed. Earth's rotation is suddenly slowing down. Evening approaches, and Marty says goodbye to Sam so that he can make it before dark. Already at night, he encounters Felicia's young neighbor, a girl skating on rollerblades, and at that very moment, all the streetlights around them suddenly go out. The light disappears, just as the internet, phone service, and television had before. But the most terrifying thing is something else. In the windows of the houses, ghostly blue reflections begin to glow all at once. The face of Chuck, accompanied by words of gratitude. Marty sends the girl home and heads toward Felicia's place. Despite their divorce, she is genuinely glad to see him. Together they go out into the yard, sit on a bench, and holding hands look up at the starry sky. But suddenly, one of the stars goes out right before their eyes, then another, and then a third. Felicia whispers that she is scared. Marty quietly admits that he is too. A moment later, after all the stars in the sky have gone dark and total darkness falls, a man named Chuck Krantz dies in a hospital room. By his bedside are his wife and son. His wife leans closer and softly whispers, They were wonderful 39 years. Thank you, Chuck. And with his final breath, not only does one man's life end, the entire universe fades away. Thus concludes the third act of the story. The second act is titled Buskers Forever and begins 9 months before Chuck's death. At that time, he was just an ordinary accountant who had traveled on a business trip to attend a conference. During a free hour, he strolled through the city streets and suddenly heard the rhythm of drums. On the sidewalk, a young drummer named Taylor was performing, beating out rhythms in hopes of earning some tips. Instead of walking past, Chuck stopped. He set his briefcase on the ground and began moving in time with the music. Taylor noticed him immediately and changed her rhythm so that the stranger could keep up more easily and dance even more expressively. Their improvised performance quickly drew the attention of passers-by. Among the spectators was a girl named Janice, who had just learned that her boyfriend had broken up with her via text message. She was upset, but swept away by the energy of the music and Chuck's charisma. She joined the rhythm too. Then Chuck invited her to dance with him, right in the center of the circle formed by the crowd. Even though he was suddenly pierced by a sharp pain in his head, the pair carried out a fiery dance that left the onlookers in awe. After the performance, they helped Taylor load her drums into a van, and then they all went down to the waterfront. There, the drummer honestly divided the money they had earned into 3 parts. When she asked Chuck why he had suddenly stopped and started dancing, he only shrugged. He himself didn't understand what had driven him. When Taylor left, Chuck walked Janice home. Firstly, because it was the polite thing to do, and secondly, because his hotel was nearby. Watching her walk away, he noticed a girl on rollerblades, the same neighbor of Felicia's we would later see. That evening, Chuck had no idea that 9 months later, while suffering from terminal brain cancer, in the rare moments between unbearable waves of pain, he would remember that very day, and he would think that his whole life had existed only for the sake of that one single street dance. After this begins the first act, titled I Contain Multitudes. Chuck is 7 years old when his parents die in a car accident. He is left in the care of his grandmother Sarah and grandfather Albie, his father's parents. During the first years, the house was filled with sorrow and a heavy atmosphere. The elderly couple struggled deeply with the loss of their son, but with time, the pain of grief dulled and life slowly began to brighten again. Grandmother would often turn on music in the kitchen, start dancing, and in doing so, passed on to little Chuck her love for dance. She taught him to feel rhythm and showed him countless musicals on VHS tapes from which he could learn a lot. But there was another mystery that intrigued the boy, the locked door at the top of the stairs that led to the tower room. His grandfather strictly forbade him to go inside and always kept the key with him. One evening, while they were watching a program about the cosmic calendar, Albie, having had too much to drink, began telling strange stories. He confessed that once, in that very room, he had seen ghosts who supposedly predicted people's deaths. Among them, he claimed, was a boy from the neighboring house who indeed died shortly afterward. Grandmother interrupted these tales, explaining that there were no spirits at all, and that Grandpa was simply drunk and confusing his memories. But Chuck's curiosity did not fade. Using childlike resourcefulness, he once visited an old neighbor. In conversation, he learned another detail. In that same room where his grandfather had seen ghosts, a man really had died long ago. He could not bear it when, after 20 years of marriage, his wife left him for another. On his final school day in the 6th grade, the literature teacher read the children a classic poem by Walt Whitman, Song of Myself. Most of the students were openly bored, but young Chuck was struck by one line, I contain multitudes. After class, he approached the teacher to ask what it meant. She placed her palms gently on his head and said, Between these hands, you hold an entire universe. Everything you have seen, heard, and learned lives here, and this universe will grow and expand as you gain more life experience. The boy thought for a moment and asked, And what will happen to this universe if I die? To which the teacher softly replied, Don't burden yourself with such gloomy thoughts. Better enjoy the beginning of your summer vacation. Chuck walked out of school, casting a casual glance at Marty in the neighboring class, but the holidays turned out to be far from happy. His grandmother passed away. After the funeral, overwhelmed with heavy thoughts, he went to the store where she had collapsed. Chuck asked the cashier to show him the spot where his grandmother had fallen, and she agreed to his request. From that moment on, the boy became obsessed with the subject of death. Recalling his grandfather's stories about the mysterious tower room, he decided to sneak a look inside. To do this, Chuck stole the keys. Albie, weary from grief and alcohol, had fallen asleep. But as soon as the boy opened the door, his grandfather suddenly appeared. He pushed Chuck aside, froze in the doorway himself, and stared at something only he could see. Then, apologizing, he took back the keys and repeated, You are forbidden to go in there. Autumn arrived. Chuck returned to school and signed up for the dance club. There were many girls and only 3 boys, but he quickly became the best dancer of them all. The lessons from his grandmother showed their effect. His moonwalk amazed everyone, both the students and the teacher. Chuck's classmate Kat suggests that they perform together at the school dance. Chuck hesitates. The girl is taller than him, and he feels that standing next to her he will look ridiculous. Then Kat brings him a pair of heeled shoes to even out their height, but the shoes turn out to be too big, so the boy stuffs them with paper. He shares the news of the performance preparations with his grandfather, but in response, he gets a lecture. Dancing is fine, but people earn their living in other ways. You must devote yourself to something that really matters. Albie, an accountant by profession, tries to instill in his grandson a love for mathematics. Chuck mutters that it is boring, but his grandfather replies, "Mathematics is the key to the universe. It explains everything, from the number of minutes in a day to how the stars are arranged. The only thing it cannot do is lie, and also explain why stars sometimes go to war." Young Chuck is torn with doubts. He does not want to perform with Kat and invents an excuse, pretending that he is feeling unwell. The girl is disappointed. The dance teacher, noticing the boy's uncertainty, says, "You should never do what you don't love, but that doesn't mean you have to lie." After long reflections under the starry sky, Chuck makes a decision. He must prove himself and do what truly brings him joy. He returns to the hall and asks Kat to dance. Their performance provokes a storm of applause. It ends with the girl's first shy kiss and a compliment from Marty, who happened to witness the moment. Years will pass, and a grown-up, serious Chuck, now an accountant in a business suit, will once again burst into dance to the music of a street performer, without even realizing that, in fact, he is returning to the happiness of his childhood. After the performance, overwhelmed with emotions, the boy steps outside to get some fresh air. He finds himself on the football field and begins dancing under the stars, as if trying to release all the feelings tearing him apart from within. In the heat of his movements, he accidentally brushes the back of his hand against the metal fence and cuts himself on its sharp edge. The small scar left from this wound will stay with him for the rest of his life. 6 years pass. Albie dies of a heart attack. Before his death, the grandfather managed to prepare everything: the funeral, the documents, even the smallest details. His savings were enough for Chuck to be able to attend college. Sam, the funeral director who once dreamed of becoming a meteorologist, tells the boy that there was something special in Albie's eyes, the sense that he knew exactly about the approach of his death and was ready for it. Since Chuck had not yet reached adulthood, his maternal grandparents came to live in the inherited house to look after him until he began his student life. But before their arrival, while sorting through his grandfather's belongings after the funeral, Chuck found a set of keys. He immediately realized the time had come to uncover the mystery of the tower. The boy climbed the stairs, inserted the key into the keyhole, and opened the door. Before him appeared an ordinary empty attic room with a single window. For a moment, disappointment washed over him, but just as he was about to leave, he suddenly turned around and saw an elderly man lying on the bed at the edge of death. Looking closer, Chuck noticed a familiar scar on the man's hand and realized the horrifying truth. It was himself in the future. He was looking at his own death. It was then that the boy understood why his grandfather had always feared this room. Albie had seen here the death of his wife Sarah, and then his own. And all these years he was tormented by the constant expectation of the inevitable. Now this burden passed on to Chuck. He too was doomed to live with the image of his own death, to wonder how many years were left for that man from the vision. But when the phantom dissolved, Chuck gathered his strength and decided he would not let this shadow destroy his life. He would live it the way he wanted, without fear, without looking back at what the spirits had shown him. Even if the end came early, it would not break him. And it is on this note that the story comes to an end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this recap, give it a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.